The rain started just as I pushed through the restaurant doors, which felt almost poetic in its cruelty. Of course it would rain. Of course the universe would add this final humiliation to what was already the worst night of my life. I stood there on the sidewalk, mascara probably running down my cheeks, my carefully chosen dress now feeling ridiculous instead of elegant. Behind me, through the restaurant's large windows, I could still see him, my blind date Marcus, laughing with the waiter. Probably making jokes about the desperate woman who'd just fled. My hands shook as I tried to call a rideshare, but my vision was too blurred with tears to see my phone screen properly. 3 years. It had been 3 years since my divorce, 3 years of my mother and well-meaning friends insisting I get back out there. 3 years of me saying I was fine alone, and this was what happened when I finally gave in. "Emma, just try," my best friend Sarah had begged. "Marcus is a friend of my husband's. He's successful, charming, and he specifically asked about you after seeing your photo." Successful, charming. What she'd failed to mention was that he was also cruel. The date had started normally enough. Marcus was handsome, well-dressed, and articulate. We'd ordered wine, made small talk about our jobs. I'd started to relax, thinking maybe Sarah had been right, maybe I was ready for this. Then his phone had rung. "Sorry, I have to take this," he'd said, but instead of stepping away, he'd answered right there at the table. "Hey, David. Yeah, I'm on that blind date I told you about." I'd frozen, my wine glass halfway to my lips. "The friend's friend thing, remember?" Marcus had continued, his voice loud enough that nearby tables could hear. "Yeah, she's here. Honestly, man, I don't know what Sarah was thinking. The photos must have been old or something. She's pretty plain in person. And she's 35, divorced, works as a librarian. Not exactly exciting, you know." The wine glass had trembled in my hand. I'd carefully set it down. "Nah, I'll stick it out for another 30 minutes so I don't seem like a complete jerk, but then I'm out. There's that new club opening tonight. Want to meet there instead? At least there'll be some attractive women." He'd laughed, a sound that made my stomach turn. I'd stood up then, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Marcus had glanced at me, and for just a second, something like embarrassment had flashed across his face. Just a second. Then he'd shrugged and kept talking. "Hold on, David, I think she needs something." "What, are you going to the bathroom?" "No," I'd said, my voice steadier than I'd felt. "I'm leaving." "Wait, what?" "Come on, don't be sensitive. It's just guy talk. Enjoy your evening, Marcus. I hope you find those attractive women at the club." I'd walked out with my head high, but the moment I'd hit the sidewalk, the tears had come. Not because I cared what Marcus thought of me. He was clearly an asshole. But because of what his words represented. Confirmation of every insecure thought I'd had about dating again at 35, about starting over after divorce, about whether anyone would ever see me as more than pretty plain. Now, standing in the rain, I couldn't stop crying. The rideshare app kept glitching, probably due to the weather, and I just wanted to go home, crawl into bed, and forget this night had ever happened. "Excuse me." The voice was deep, refined, and came from directly behind me. I spun around, hastily wiping at my eyes, and found myself looking at a man who seemed to have stepped out of a cologne advertisement. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair precisely styled, wearing an immaculate charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His features were striking: sharp jawline, intense dark eyes, an almost intimidating handsomeness that made Marcus look like a boy playing dress-up. Behind him, a sleek black Mercedes sedan idled at the curb, its driver standing patiently by the open rear door. "Are you all right?" the man asked, though his tone suggested he could see perfectly well that I wasn't. "I'm fine," I lied, trying to discreetly wipe my face again. "Just waiting for a car." I heard everything. My heart stopped. "What?" He gestured toward the restaurant. "I was dining in the private section. The wall between my booth and your table is thinner than the restaurant probably intended. I heard your entire date, including his phone conversation." Horror washed over me. It wasn't enough that I'd been humiliated in front of Marcus and probably half the restaurant. Now this impossibly handsome stranger had witnessed it too. I couldn't form words. I just wanted to disappear. What he said to his friend was unacceptable, the man continued, his voice carrying an edge of anger that surprised me. Cruel and disrespectful. No one deserves to be spoken about that way, especially not within earshot. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite my coat. It's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but it's done. I just want to go home. He studied me for a moment with those intense eyes, and I felt like he was seeing far more than I wanted to reveal. Your rideshare application isn't working, is it? The storm is causing system-wide issues. You'll be waiting for quite some time, and it's pouring. As if to emphasize his point, the rain intensified. I was already soaked, my carefully styled hair plastered to my head. I can wait, I said stubbornly, even though I was shivering now. I'm heading downtown. May I offer you a ride? He must have seen my hesitation because he added, my driver's name is James. He's been with me for 8 years, and there's a partition in the car. You'll be perfectly safe, I assure you. Every safety lesson I'd ever learned screamed at me not to get in a car with a stranger, no matter how expensive his suit was. But I was soaked, freezing, emotionally destroyed, and the rideshare app had just crashed entirely. Why would you help me? He asked. You don't know me. Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion I couldn't quite read. Let's just say I have a particular distaste for men who think they can treat women as objects to be rated and discarded. Consider it my good deed for the day. There was something in his voice, a hint of personal history, that made me believe him. And honestly, what did I have to lose? My dignity was already in shambles. Okay, I heard myself say. Thank you. I live in the Harrison district. A perfect coincidence. My office is nearby. His office. At night. In a suit that expensive. This man was clearly important, though I had no idea who he was. James, the driver, opened an umbrella and helped me to the car with such practiced professionalism that I felt like royalty instead of a drowned rat. The interior of the Mercedes was even more luxurious than I'd expected. Leather seats that looked barely sat in, ambient lighting, and yes, a privacy partition. The mysterious man slid in beside me, maintaining a respectful distance, and James closed the door before returning to the driver's seat. Where in the Harrison district? The man asked. I gave him my address, and he relayed it to James through an intercom. As the car glided smoothly into traffic, I became hyper-aware of how bedraggled I must look compared to my companion's pristine appearance. I'm Emma, I said finally, because the silence felt heavy. Emma Chin. Alexander Kane, he replied, extending his hand. I shook it, noting his firm but not aggressive grip. Thank you again for this, Mr. Kane. You really didn't have to. Alexander, please. And as I said, I couldn't leave you standing in the rain after. He paused. After what you'd been through. I laughed bitterly. You mean after I was publicly humiliated by a man who thought I was pretty plain, and not exactly exciting? Estructura arcos narrativos para historia de romance com resoluco satisfactoria. Estu desenvolvendo bem a historia. Preciso continuar construindo. O desenvolvimento de conexo entre Emma e Alexandre descoberta de quem Alexander realmente, co. O desenvolvimento do romance conflitos e crescimento pessoal de Emma uma resoluco satisfactoria. Vou continuar desenvolvendo a historia para alcançar as 7.000 to 9.000 palavras necessárias para 30 minutos de leitura. He's an idiot, Alexander said flatly. Though that's too kind a word. Emma Chin, you are neither plain nor boring. You're a librarian, correct? I blinked, surprised he'd remembered that detail from the overheard conversation. Yes, I'm the head librarian at the Central City Library. Then you're someone who dedicates her life to knowledge, to helping others learn and grow. That's admirable. What's boring about that? According to Marcus, pretty much everything. Marcus is a middle management consultant with delusions of grandeur, Alexander said. I know the type. They measure success by their car lease and their table at whatever club is currently trendy. They never create anything, never build anything lasting. They're forgettable. There was such certainty in his voice that I found myself asking, "And what do you do, Alexander?" "I run a company," he said simply. "We develop sustainable technology." Something about the way he said "a company" made me think he was underselling it, but I didn't push. Instead, I looked out the window at the rain-soaked city passing by. "I shouldn't have gone on that date," I said quietly. I knew it was a mistake. But my friend Sarah kept pushing, and my mother won't stop talking about how I need to move forward after my divorce, and I wanted everyone to stop looking at me with pity. "So you agreed to something you didn't want to do to please other people. When you put it that way, it sounds pathetic." "It sounds human," Alexander corrected. "We all do things we don't want to do for the people we care about. Though perhaps this experience will help you set better boundaries." I glanced at him, curious. "You sound like you speak from experience." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've spent most of my life doing what others expected of me. Only recently have I started making choices based on what I actually want." "And how's that going?" "It's complicated." He met my eyes. "But infinitely more honest." The car pulled up in front of my apartment building, a modest but well-maintained structure in a neighborhood that was gentrifying but not yet unaffordable. It felt even more humble compared to the luxury vehicle I was sitting in. "This is me," I said, but I found myself reluctant to leave. Alexander Kane was intense and a bit intimidating, but there was something about him that made me want to keep talking. Maybe it was the way he'd defended me to his own thoughts, or the hint of loneliness I sensed beneath his polished exterior. "Emma," he said as I reached for the door handle. "I realize this may seem forward, but would you be willing to have dinner with me tomorrow night?" Froze. "You want to have dinner with me?" After hearing how I'm pretty plain. "I want to have dinner with an intelligent woman who values knowledge, who showed grace under pressure tonight, and who, frankly, I find quite beautiful. The fact that she's a librarian only makes her more interesting." My heart did something complicated in my chest. "You're asking me on a date. The same night I just had the worst date of my life. I'm asking if you'd like to have dinner with someone who will actually appreciate your company." It was absurd. I just met this man. I knew nothing about him except that he had money, good manners, and had overheard my humiliation. This could be a terrible idea. But when I looked into his dark eyes, I saw something genuine there. And maybe it was the emotional upheaval of the evening, or maybe it was rebellion against ever letting someone like Marcus make me feel small again, but I heard myself say, "Yes, I'd like that." A smile transformed his face, softening the sharp angles and revealing a warmth I hadn't expected. "I'll pick you up at 7. And Emma, wear whatever makes you feel confident. You don't need to impress anyone." I smiled back, a real smile this time. "Thank you, Alexander. For the ride, for the kindness, and for hearing me. Even if you didn't mean to. It was the best eavesdropping I've ever done," he said with a hint of humor. I climbed out of the car, James somehow appearing with the umbrella to walk me to my building's entrance. As I turned back, I saw Alexander watching me through the window, and something in his gaze made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. The Mercedes pulled away, and I stood there in the rain for a moment, my mind spinning. What had just happened? One moment I'd been at the lowest point of my night, and the next I had a date with a mysterious, handsome man who'd come to my rescue like something out of a movie. As I rode the elevator to my third-floor apartment, I caught sight of my reflection and grimaced. My mascara was indeed running, my dress was soaked, and my hair was a disaster. I looked exactly like someone who'd had the worst date of her life. But underneath the mess, there was something else in my reflection, a spark of excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. I called Sarah the moment I got inside. "Emma, oh my God, I am so sorry. Ryan just told me what happened. Marcus called him and..." "Sarah, it's okay," I cut her off. I'm actually calling about something else. I told her everything, from Alexander overhearing my date to the car ride to the dinner invitation. There was a long silence on the other end. Emma, Sarah said carefully. I know you're upset about Marcus, and rightfully so, but are you sure this is a good idea? You just met this man. I know. It's crazy. But Sarah, there was something about him. The way he spoke to me, the way he defended me even though he didn't have to. And he didn't make me feel like a charity case. He made me feel valuable. What did you say his name was? Alexander Kane. He said he runs a sustainable technology company. Another long pause. Then, Emma, are you telling me that Alexander Kane asked you out? Yes. Why do you know him? Know him? Sarah's voice pitched up several octaves. Emma, he's only the CEO of Kane Tech Industries. It's one of the fastest growing tech companies in the country. He's on the cover of business magazines. He's like a billionaire or something. My stomach dropped. What? Alexander Kane. He's famous. Well, famous in the business world. He's notoriously private, hardly ever does interviews, but everyone knows about him. He revolutionized green energy storage or something. Emma, he's kind of a big deal. I sat down heavily on my couch. He said he ran a company. He made it sound like a small business. That's probably because to him, everything is relative. The man could probably buy our entire neighborhood and not notice the expense. My mind raced. A billionaire CEO had offered me a ride home and asked me out. This made no sense. People like that didn't notice people like me. People like that dated models and actresses and other CEOs. Sarah, what am I supposed to do? Should I cancel? This is insane. Are you kidding? Sarah said. You're going on that date. You're going to put on your best dress, do your hair and makeup, and you're going to have dinner with one of the most eligible bachelors in the city. And then you're going to tell me every single detail. But why would he be interested in me? I'm a librarian. I drive a 7-year-old Honda. My idea of a wild Friday night is reorganizing my bookshelves. Emma Chin, stop it. You're intelligent, kind, passionate about your work. And you have more depth in your pinky finger than Marcus has in his entire body. Maybe Alexander Kane is smart enough to see that. After we hung up, I Googled Alexander Kane. Sarah hadn't been exaggerating. Page after page of search results appeared. Alexander Kane named Tech CEO of the Year. Kane Tech Industries valued at $5 billion. The enigmatic Alexander Kane shuns spotlight despite success. The photos showed the same man who'd been in the car with me, though in most of them his expression was cool, almost cold. Professional photos from conferences and award ceremonies where he stood slightly apart from others. His posture perfect. His face unreadable. But there was one candid shot that caught my attention. It showed him at some charity event, and he was looking at something off camera with an expression of genuine warmth. It was the same expression I'd seen in the car when he smiled at me. I found an interview from 2 years ago in a business magazine. The journalist had noted that Kane was intensely private about his personal life, and seemed more comfortable discussing quantum mechanics than his own feelings. When asked about his relationship status, he'd simply said he was focused on his work. I read deeper. Alexander Kane, 38 years old, had founded Kane Tech at 25 with money from his first startup sale. He'd grown up in foster care, put himself through MIT, and built his empire from nothing. Despite his wealth, he was known for his modest lifestyle and his generous philanthropy, though he always donated anonymously. The more I read, the less I understood why this man, this brilliant, successful, impossibly wealthy man, would ask out a librarian he'd found crying on a sidewalk. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate. I kept thinking about the date, about what to wear, about what we talk about. How did you make conversation with a billionaire? You look distracted, my assistant Marcus, different Marcus thankfully, said as I reorganized the same shelf for the 3rd time. I have a date tonight, I admitted. His eyebrows shot up. That's great. With who? Someone I just met. It's Complicated. Complicated how? He's very successful. Like extremely successful. And I'm wondering why he'd be interested in me. Marcus the librarian, not to be confused with Marcus the asshole, leaned against the shelf and looked at me seriously. Emma, you've been my boss for 3 years now. In that time, you've completely transformed this library. You started the literacy program that's helped hundreds of kids. You got us that technology grant. You fight for this place and these books like they're your children. You're passionate, smart, and you care about things that matter. If this guy can see that, then he's the lucky one, not you. I felt tears prick my eyes, but good tears this time. Thank you, Marcus. I needed to hear that. At 6 o'clock, I rushed home to get ready. I decided on a deep blue dress that Sarah had helped me pick out years ago. Elegant but not trying too hard, sophisticated but still me. I did my hair and makeup carefully, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who looked confident. I looked like myself, but the version of myself who knew her worth. At exactly 7 o'clock, my intercom buzzed. Miss Chen, there's a car here for you, my building's doorman said. My heart hammered as I grabbed my purse and headed downstairs. The same black Mercedes was waiting, James standing beside it with an umbrella even though the rain had stopped. Good evening, Miss Chen, he said with a kind smile. You look lovely. Thank you, James. He opened the door, and I slid inside to find Alexander waiting. He was wearing a different suit, navy this time with a silver tie, and he looked even more handsome than I remembered. Emma, he said, and my name on his lips sent a shiver through me. You look beautiful. You clean up pretty well yourself, I said, then immediately cringed at how casual that sounded. But he laughed, a genuine laugh that made his eyes crinkle. I'll take that as a compliment. As James pulled into traffic, I decided to address the elephant in the car. So, I Googled you. Alexander's expression turned rueful. Ah, I was hoping you wouldn't. Why didn't you tell me you're a billionaire CEO? For the same reason you didn't tell me you're one of the youngest head librarians in the city library system's history. I wanted you to see me, not my bank account. How did you? I Googled you too, he admitted. I found several articles about your innovative programs. You've increased youth literacy rates in your district by 30%. That's remarkable. I felt myself blush. It's just doing my job. It's exceptional work, and you know it. Don't diminish your accomplishments any more than you'd want me to diminish mine. We drove to a restaurant I'd never heard of, probably because it was the kind of place that didn't advertise and required reservations months in advance. The host greeted Alexander by name and led us to a private table in a garden courtyard strung with lights. I thought we could use some privacy, Alexander explained. I hope this isn't too much. It's beautiful, I said honestly. The space felt intimate but not overwhelming, romantic but not presumptuous. Once we'd ordered, and I'd been surprised to see Alexander ask for the chef's recommendation rather than ordering something expensive to impress me, the conversation began to flow. Tell me about the library, he said. What made you choose that career? Thought about it. When I was 8, my family immigrated here from Taiwan. My English was terrible and I felt so lost at school. But our local librarian, Mrs. Patterson, she would spend hours with me after school, helping me practice reading. She never made me feel stupid or less. She made me feel like the world was full of possibilities, and books were the keys to unlock them. So you became a librarian to do the same for others. Yes, and because I genuinely love books. I love the smell of them, the weight of them, the way a story can transport you. In a world where everything is becoming digital and disposable, libraries are places where knowledge is still sacred. Alexander listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, genuinely interested in my answers. He didn't check his phone once. He didn't look over my shoulder to see if someone more important had entered the restaurant. He was simply present. Your turn, I said after a while. Tell me about Kane Tech. Why sustainable technology? His expression grew more serious. I grew up in foster care, bouncing between homes. One of them was near a factory that polluted the local water supply. Kids in that neighborhood had higher rates of asthma, learning disabilities, cancer. The company knew what they were doing, but they didn't care because it was cheaper to pay the occasional lawsuit than to fix the problem. That's awful. I was 12 when I decided that if I ever had the power to make a difference, I would. Technology is advancing so rapidly, but often at the expense of the environment and public health. I wanted to prove that innovation and responsibility aren't mutually exclusive. And you have, I said. I read about your work. Your energy storage system could revolutionize solar power. He looked surprised that I'd read that deeply. You really did your research. Of course I did. You're not the only one who knows how to use Google. Pause. Can I ask you something personal? Anything. Last night you said you'd spent most of your life doing what others expected of you. What did you mean? Alexander was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the stem of his wine glass. For years I was so focused on proving myself, proving I wasn't just another foster kid who'd amount to nothing, that I forgot to actually live. I built the company, made the money, achieved all the traditional markers of success. But I was lonely. I dated women my board of directors thought would be appropriate, attended events I hated, said the right things to the right people. I was successful, but I wasn't happy. What changed? My best friend died last year. Sudden heart attack at 37. And at his funeral, his wife said something that stayed with me. She said, he lived the way he wanted to live, not the way anyone told him to. It made me realize I wasn't really living at all. I was just performing. I reached across the table and touched his hand. I'm sorry about your friend. Thank you. He turned his hand over and gently squeezed mine. But meeting you last night, it reminded me why I made this decision to change. You walked out of that restaurant with your head high, even though you were hurt. You chose dignity over trying to salvage something that wasn't worth saving. That takes courage. I was just crying on a sidewalk when you found me. You were processing your emotions honestly instead of pretending everything was fine. There's strength in that. The dinner stretched into hours. We talked about everything. Our favorite books, our worst jobs, our childhood dreams. Alexander told me about teaching himself to code in a library computer lab because he couldn't afford his own computer. I told him about my ex-husband, about how I'd married young and divorced when I realized we'd grown into different people. Do you regret it? Alexander asked. The marriage? No. Taught me who I am and what I need. Sometimes the wrong relationship is necessary to help you understand what the right one would look like. And what would the right one look like? I thought about it carefully. Someone who sees me. Not a version of me, not who they want me to be, but actually me. Someone who challenges me to grow but accepts me as I am. Someone who shares their real self, not just the polished version they show the world. That's rare, Alexander said quietly. Most people can't even see themselves that clearly, let alone someone else. What about you? What would the right relationship look like? I used to think it meant finding someone who fit into my life perfectly. Someone who could attend the galas and cocktail parties, who knew which fork to use and what to say to investors. But I'm starting to think it's about finding someone who makes you want to build a new life, not just fit someone into your existing one. Our eyes met across the table, and something passed between us. Recognition, possibility, a beginning. When James dropped me off that night, Alexander walked me to my building's entrance. I had a wonderful time, he said. So did I. Thank you for dinner. And for last night. And for being you. Emma, I know this is fast, but I'd like to see you again. Not just dinner, I want to spend time with you. Really get to know you. My heart raced. I'd like that too. Good. He smiled. Are you free on Saturday? There's somewhere I'd like to take you. Where? It's a surprise. Wear comfortable shoes. He kissed my cheek, and even that small gesture sent electricity through me. As I rode the elevator up, I couldn't stop smiling. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander and I fell into a pattern. He'd come by the library at lunch, and we'd eat sandwiches while I showed him my favorite sections. He'd pick me up after work, and we'd walk through the city, talking for hours. On Saturday, he'd taken me to a book restoration workshop he'd found, knowing I'd love it. On Sunday, I'd dragged him to a used bookstore in a neighborhood he'd never visited, and we'd spent 3 hours browsing. He never treated me like I was beneath him or acted like his wealth made him superior. He was curious about my world, genuinely interested in my work. And slowly, I got to see beneath his polished exterior to the man underneath. Someone who was brilliant but unsure how to connect with people, successful but still haunted by the foster kid who'd never felt like he belonged anywhere. "You make me feel normal," he told me one night as we sat on my couch, sharing a bottle of wine. "Everyone else either wants something from me or is intimidated by me. You just treat me like a person." "You are a person," I said. "A kind, thoughtful person who happens to be very successful. But that's not the most interesting thing about you." "What is?" "The way you listen. Really listen. The way you remember small details. The way you get excited about ideas. The way you're trying to save the world one solar panel at a time." He kissed me then, our first real kiss, and it felt like coming home. A month into our relationship, the first cracks began to show. It started when a photo of us appeared in a business magazine's gossip section. Tech billionaire Alexander Kane spotted with mysterious brunette. "I'm sorry," Alexander said when he called to warn me. "I should have prepared you for this." "It's fine," I said, though I felt uneasy. "It's just one photo." But it wasn't just one photo. More appeared. Paparazzi started showing up outside my building and the library. My phone rang constantly with reporters asking for comments. My co-workers suddenly treated me differently, either overly friendly or quietly resentful. "Miss Chen, there are photographers outside," my assistant Marcus said one day. "They're disrupting our patrons." "I'll handle it," I said, my stomach churning with anxiety. The worst part was the comments online. The articles about us were filled with speculation and cruelty. "What does a billionaire see in a librarian? She must be after his money. She's so plain. He could do so much better. Gold digger alert." I tried to ignore it, but Marcus's words echoed in my head. Plain. Not exciting. Why would someone like Alexander want someone like me? Things came to a head when Alexander invited me to a charity gala. "It's for a foundation I support," he explained. "I know it's not really your scene, but it would mean a lot to me if you'd come." I bought a new dress I couldn't afford, got my hair done professionally, and spent hours getting ready. When Alexander picked me up, his eyes widened. "You look stunning," he said. But at the gala I felt like a fraud. Everyone there seemed to know each other, speaking a language of investments and acquisitions that I barely understood. Women in designer gowns looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. Men spoke to Alexander while acting like I wasn't even there. "And this is," one woman said, her tone making it clear she thought I was the hired help. "This is Emma Chen, my girlfriend," Alexander said firmly, his arm around my waist. "Emma, this is Veronica Hartley. She's on the board of several companies." "How nice," Veronica said with a cold smile. "And what do you do, Emma?" "I'm a librarian." "Oh, how quaint." The night dragged on. I smiled until my face hurt, made polite conversation, and pretended I belonged. But inside I felt like I was drowning. In the car ride home, Alexander noticed my silence. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "Emma, talk to me." "I don't belong in that world," I burst out. "Those people, those conversations. I had nothing to contribute. They all looked at me like I was some kind of interloper. Like they couldn't understand why you'd bring someone like me." "Someone like you." Alexander's voice was sharp. "You mean someone intelligent, accomplished, and genuine. Someone who does meaningful work instead of just moving money around. Someone plain. Someone boring. Someone who doesn't fit." He had James pull over immediately. In the quiet darkness of the car, Alexander turned to me. "Is that really what you think?" That you're plain and boring. It's what Marcus said. It's what those people at the gala thought. And honestly, Alexander, sometimes I wonder what you see in me. You could be with anyone. Models, actresses, other CEOs. Why would you choose me? Because everyone else wants Alexander Kane, billionaire CEO. You're the only person who wants Alex, the guy who loves terrible science fiction movies and donates to animal shelters and still gets nervous before public speaking. You see me, Emma. Really see me. And I see you too. Not a librarian, not a divorcee, not whatever labels people want to put on you. I see a woman who fights for what matters, who loves with her whole heart, who makes me want to be better. But what if it's not enough? What if? Stop, he said gently, taking my hands. Let me tell you what I see when I look at you. I see someone who lights up when she talks about books. I see someone who remembers the names of every child who comes into her library. I see someone who isn't afraid to cry, to be vulnerable, to be real. I see the woman I'm falling in love with. My breath caught. You're falling in love with me. Yes, he said simply. I know it's fast. I know this world of mine is complicated and often cruel. But Emma, you make me believe that there's more to life than balance sheets and board meetings. You make me want to be part of something real. I'm falling for you too, I whispered. But I'm scared. I'm scared I'm not strong enough for your world. I'm scared I'll embarrass you or hold you back. You could never embarrass me. And as for my world, maybe it's time I left some of it behind. Maybe I've been living in a world that doesn't really matter, when I should have been building a life instead. He kissed me then, and I let myself believe that maybe this could work. But believing it and living it were two different things. The pressure intensified. My mother called, having seen the articles online, alternating between excitement that I was dating someone wealthy and concern that I'd get hurt. Sarah worried that I was moving too fast. Strangers on the internet continued to dissect our relationship, our appearances, my worth. And then there was Alexander's world. His board of directors was unhappy about the publicity. His investors questioned his judgment. People who'd never cared about his personal life suddenly had opinions about who he should be with. They want me to issue a statement, Alexander told me one night, furious. They think our relationship is damaging the company's image. Maybe they're right, I said quietly. What? Maybe I am damaging your image. Maybe this was a mistake. Emma, don't do this. I'm not strong enough, Alexander. Every day there's something new. Photographers, comments, people looking at me like I don't belong. I can't even do my job properly anymore without worrying about cameras outside the library. Then I'll fix it. I'll hire security. I'll sue the publications. You can't fix people's opinions. You can't change the fact that I'm not what they expected. And you can't change the fact that I don't know if I can be what you need. What I need, Alexander said, his voice tight with emotion, is you. Exactly as you are. I don't care what anyone else thinks. But I do, I said, tears streaming down my face. I care that your board thinks I'm a liability. I care that people think I'm with you for your money. I care that I can't walk down the street without feeling like everyone's judging me. And most of all, I care that I'm making your life harder. Emma, I think we need to take a break, I said, the words tearing at my heart. I need time to figure out if I'm strong enough for this. And you need to decide if I'm worth the complications I'm bringing to your life. You're worth everything, he said desperately. Emma, please don't do this. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. I left his apartment that night and cried the entire way home. I'd fallen in love with Alexander Kane, and I just walked away from him because I was too afraid to fight for what we had. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I threw myself into work, staying at the library until late every night. I avoided Sarah's calls and my mother's worried texts. I deleted all my social media accounts and tried to pretend that the whispers and stares from strangers didn't hurt. Alexander tried to reach me. He sent flowers to the library, beautiful bouquets with notes that made me cry. He called and texted, each message more heartbreaking than the last. But I didn't respond. Couldn't. Because every time I thought about trying again, I remembered that feeling at the gala, that sense of not belonging, of being weighed and found wanting. Marcus, librarian Marcus, finally confronted me. "Boss, you look terrible." "Thanks," I said dryly. "I'm serious. You're here until midnight every night, you barely eat, and you look like you haven't slept in days. What's going on?" I told him everything, the date with Alexander, our relationship, the pressure, the breakup. "Let me get this straight," Marcus said when I finished. "You broke up with a guy who loves you, who sees how amazing you are, because other people made you feel bad about yourself? It's more complicated than that. Is it? Or did you let Marcus the asshole win? Because from where I'm sitting, you're doing exactly what he predicted, letting other people's opinions define your worth. That's not. Emma, I've worked with you for 3 years. I've seen you fight the city council for library funding. I've seen you stand up to parents who want to ban books. I've seen you advocate for programs that others said were impossible. You're one of the strongest people I know. But for some reason, when it comes to your personal life, you don't fight. You run." His words stung because they were true. I'd run from my marriage when it got hard. I'd run from dating after my divorce. And now I was running from Alexander because I was afraid. "What if I'm not enough?" I whispered. "What if you are?" Marcus countered. "What if you're exactly what he needs, and he's exactly what you need, and you're throwing it away because you're scared?" That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Alexander. The way he'd defended me that first night. The way he listened when I talked about my work. The way he made me laugh. The way he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person in the world. And I realized something. I'd spent so much time worrying about whether I was good enough for his world that I'd forgotten to ask if his world was good enough for me. Did I want to be part of that world of galas and boards and constant scrutiny? Well, but did I want to be with Alexander? Absolutely yes. The question wasn't whether I was strong enough for his world. The question was whether we could build our own world together, one that honored both our values and our love. I picked up my phone and called him. It was 2 a.m, but he answered on the first ring. "Emma." His voice was rough, hopeful, scared. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry I ran. I'm sorry I let fear make decisions for me. I'm sorry I didn't trust what we have." "You don't need to apologize. I understand." "No, let me finish. I've been thinking about what you said, about building a life instead of fitting into an existing one. I don't want your world, Alexander. The galas, the paparazzi, the board meetings. That's not me and it never will be. But I want you. I want us. And I think we can find a middle ground if we're both willing to compromise." There was a long silence. Then, "I've been thinking the same thing. Actually, I've been doing more than thinking. Can you meet me at the library tomorrow? I have something to show you." "The library? Why?" "Trust me. Please." The next morning I got to the library early, nervous and excited. Alexander was already there, waiting on the steps with a folder in his hands. "Hi," I said, suddenly shy. "Hi." He looked at me like he was drinking in the sight of me. "God, I've missed you." "I've missed you too." He handed me the folder. "Before we talk, I need you to look at this." Inside were architectural drawings and plans. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. Is this a library?" "Not just any library," Alexander said. "I'm building a technology center and library in the neighborhood where I grew up. Free internet access, coding classes, college prep courses, and yes, books. Lots of books. I want it to be a place where kids like I was can discover possibilities." Tears blurred my vision. "Alexander, this is incredible. I want you to run it." "What?" "You'd still be head librarian at Central City Library, but I'm creating a position, Director of Community Outreach and Education. You'd design the programs, hire the staff, make this place everything you've dreamed a library could be. And Emma, you'd have complete creative control. This would be your vision." I stared at the plans, overwhelmed. "Why?" "Because you showed me what really matters. All this wealth, all this success. It doesn't mean anything if I'm not using it to make a difference. And you've dedicated your life to making a difference. I want to support that. I want to support you. Not because I'm trying to control you or because I think you need saving, but because I believe in what you do. This is everything I've ever wanted, I whispered. There's more. He took my hands. I've made some changes. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations at Kane Tech. I'll still be on the board and involved in major decisions, but I'm hiring a CEO to handle the parts of the job I don't care about. The schmoozing, the politics, the constant visibility. I want time for a life, Emma. I want time for us. You do that. I'm 38 years old, and until I met you, I didn't know what I was working for. I thought success meant building the biggest company, making the most money, being in the most magazines. But you taught me that success is about impact, about connection, about being true to yourself. I don't want to spend another year living someone else's version of my life. I was crying now, but happy tears this time. I love you, Alexander Kane. I love you too, Emma Chen. And I promise you we'll build a life on our terms. No more trying to fit into worlds that weren't made for us. We'll create our own. He kissed me there on the library steps, and it felt like a beginning, not just of our relationship, but of the lives we were choosing to build together. 6 months later. The grand opening of the Kane Community Center and Library was perfect. Not because everything went smoothly. There were a few technical hiccups and the catering was late, but because it was real. Kids from the neighborhood were already exploring the shelves and signing up for coding classes. Parents were asking about the GED programs. Teenagers were checking out the 3D printing lab. You did it, Alexander said, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we watched the crowd. We did it, I corrected. Marcus the librarian, who was now assistant director of the new center, approached with a smile. Boss, there's a reporter from the education section asking for a comment. Tell them Director Chen would be happy to speak with them, Alexander said before I could respond. I turned in his arms. Director Chen. That's your title, your center, your vision. I'm just the guy who wrote the checks. You're so much more than that. I know, he said with a smile. I'm also the guy who gets to go home with you tonight. The reporter's interview went well. I talked about community engagement, about breaking down barriers to education, about creating opportunities. I didn't mention Alexander's wealth or our relationship. This project stood on its own merits. As we were leaving that evening, I saw a familiar car parked outside. Not the Mercedes but my old Honda. I thought you might want your car back, Alexander said. I know you've been using mine, but I also know you value your independence. You had it detailed. And fixed that weird noise it was making. And updated the sound system. But it's still your car. I laughed, wrapping my arms around him. You really do see me. Always, he promised. Even when you don't see yourself clearly. As we drove home in my car because I insisted, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. Alexander had stepped back from Kane Tech's public face, focusing on innovation and strategy instead of publicity. The board had grumbled at first, but the company's stock had actually risen under the new CEO's leadership. I'd kept my position at Central City Library while building the new center. It was exhausting work, but fulfilling in ways I'd never imagined. And yes, there were still photographers sometimes, still gossip, still people who couldn't understand why we were together. But I'd learned to tune it out, to focus on what mattered. The work we were doing, the life we were building, the love we shared. We'd bought a house together. Not a mansion, despite Alexander's ability to afford one, but a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood. We adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier we named Dewey after the library cat from the famous book. We hosted dinner parties with my friends and his, mixing librarians and tech entrepreneurs in unexpected but wonderful ways. And most importantly, we were happy. Not perfect, not without challenges, but genuinely, deeply happy. 1 year after that first terrible blind date, Alexander and I were back at the restaurant where we'd first met, though this time we were dining together in the private section. Do you ever think about that night? Yes. About what would have happened if you hadn't been there. Every day, Alexander said. I think about how close I came to never meeting you. How lucky I was that I happened to be in that booth at that moment. Marcus, the asshole, probably thinks he dodged a bullet. Marcus, the asshole, is now dating a woman who, according to Sarah, is exactly like him. They deserve each other. I raised my glass. To terrible blind dates that lead to wonderful relationships. To women who walk out of restaurants with their heads held high, Alexander added. To men who know how to listen. To building our own world. To us, I finished. We clinked glasses and drank, and I felt perfectly content. Not because my life had turned into a fairy tale. It hadn't. It was messy and complicated and full of challenges. But it was real and it was ours, and that was everything. Later that night, as we were leaving the restaurant, Alexander stopped me on the sidewalk where he'd first found me crying. Emma Chen, will you marry me? He pulled out a ring, not huge and flashy, but beautiful and perfectly suited to me, with a blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds. It's blue like the dress you wore on our first date, he explained. And like the cover of your favorite book. And like your eyes when you cry happy tears, which I hope to see right now. I was indeed crying happy tears. Yes, I said. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on my finger and kissed me, and I thought about how far I'd come from that night a year ago when I'd stood in this exact spot, mascara running, heartbroken, wondering if I'd ever find someone who truly saw me. I'd found him. Or rather, he'd found me. And together, we'd found something neither of us knew we were looking for. A love that didn't require us to be anyone other than who we truly were. As we walked to the car, my Honda, because I'd driven tonight, I looked back at the restaurant one more time. Thank you, Marcus, the asshole, I said with a laugh. Why? Alexander asked, confused. Because if he hadn't been such a jerk, I wouldn't have been crying on that sidewalk. And you wouldn't have heard everything. And we wouldn't be here now. Alexander considered this. I suppose we owe him a thank you card. Let's not get carried away. We drove home, engaged and happy and excited for the future. Two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way and built something beautiful from the worst night of my life. Sometimes I've learned, the most wonderful beginnings come from the most painful endings. And sometimes, the person who rescues you from your lowest moment becomes the person you want beside you for all your highest ones. This was my story. And it was just beginning.